back a little bit, people won't even notice.
Exactly. Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Telling It Like It Is Facebook Live show. My name is Jade Alberts, the founder of Peer Guidance. We listen, guide, and connect small business startups and entrepreneur. Sharing knowledge and stories is why I started the Telling It Like It Is Facebook Live show. It is live. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. If you are watching this after the fact on a social media channel, ask away. We will get to your questions. I would like to thank Evolutionize for sponsoring us. They are Alberta's mobile optometry clinic, a traditional optometry clinic, but they bring their 40-foot Winnebago to you. Today's guest is Craig Elias. He is the entrepreneur in residence at Bow Valley College. Craig, thank you for joining me, and how are you today?
Hey, my pleasure. Glad to be doing this. Looking forward to it.
I know I've been looking forward to our talk for a long time. We met through the rainforest. We tried to connect for coffee, but we haven't been able to. But hey, here we are, and I'm excited, and thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Perfect. I'll jump right into it here because I know we're a little bit short on time today, but I'll give a brief introduction, and then we'll get into the questions.
Sure.
So Craig is a recent recipient of the World Federation of Colleges Polytechnics Biannual Gold Award of Excellence in Entrepreneurship. He's an award-winning educator, entrepreneur, author, and highly sought-after startup mentor. After winning a $1 million prize in a global billion-dollar pitch idea and spending time in Silicon Valley with his first venture, Craig returned home to Alberta to help startups and aspiring first-time entrepreneurs. For the past 6 years, Craig has been the entrepreneur in residence at Bow Valley College, where each year he gives away over $125,000 to student entrepreneurs and helps post-secondary students from all across Alberta become first-time entrepreneurs. He also runs Calgary 5-day Innovation Rodeo, the province-wide students to startup meetup group, and 3 different student pitch competitions: VentureQuest, 150 startups, and INVENTUREs. I know that's an impressive resume. I don't know how you have all the time in doing that, but let's talk a little bit about your work with Bow Valley College. It's iconic, and not only it contributes outstanding people into our community, but also entrepreneurs. So please explain your role as the entrepreneur in residence.
Yeah, so my job, I'm one of the luckiest guys on the planet because I have this awesome job where I don't teach, I don't grade, I don't have exams, I don't do any of that stuff. I just spend time with students who would like one day to be an entrepreneur. I help put them on that path, or I help students that already have an idea, and it's all about how do we help them scale those ideas. So imagine this, relatively lucky entrepreneur that now gets to go share not just his experience, especially the time I spent in Silicon Valley, but also his crazy network with anybody who wants to try and find a way to get started the first time around. I think it's super hard to become an entrepreneur the first time around. That's why I focus on first-time entrepreneurs. I still do coffee meetings with lots of other people, but the stuff I do across the province that's funded by RBC and the Hunter Family Foundation, I go across the province because there's only, last time I really counted, there's only 5 schools, post-secondary institutions, publicly funded, that have any resources for students to become entrepreneurs. So the other 21 don't have anything. So I'm like, how do we find a way to collaborate more and just put more students into this awesome opportunity called entrepreneurship?
No, absolutely. And I know you were talking about the one thing that we're talking about even beforehand in the last month is really making Alberta's ecosystem one, not a Calgary versus Edmonton. And briefly, we were discussing before, you head all over the provinces to every single type of college and talk to these kids. Explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate that when I came up with this crazy idea, I went to talk to a guy named Derek Hunter, and Derek's like, wow, I love this idea. He gave me some money to get started. I went to RBC. I saw a really cool lady named Jerry Land. She gave me some money to get started. We did a few interesting things. We're like, hey, this works. Go do it again. Let's see what we can do 2 years in a row. Make sure it's not just a little bit of luck. And then last year they showed up with a whole bunch more money and said, okay, here's enough money for 4 years. We want you to go make this program bigger. So like even in the next few weeks, I'm going to drive to Slave Lake. I'm going to drive to St. Paul where they're going to shoot me portage, colleges. So it's colleges, polytechnics, universities, all the way across the province. And it's just this amazing opportunity just to help students say, hey, this is how easy it is to become an entrepreneur. It's way easier than people think it is. They just don't know how to get started.
Oh no! I mean, getting started is always a hard part. Do you see the excitement in rural? In rural Alberta, the same as in, let's say, Calgary?
So I think it's different in every place, and a lot of it depends, but it predominantly, unfortunately, depends upon my ability to get into the right people inside the post-secondary institution. Because I tried to start at the top, but then it turned out that there wasn't a lot of, I guess, I don't want to say a lot of communication, but it's when I went to these institutions for the first time, when I met the instructors for these programs, were like, you need to come to my school. You need to come to my class. So I went to Grand Prairie. I visited 3 classes at Grand Prairie Regional College. And then one of them said, hang on a second. We didn't get to this topic while you're here. Can you do this over the web? So I did a Zoom meeting with a class just yesterday, helping them come up with all their financial analysis and be able to get it done in less than 20 minutes. So I'm learning once you go there in person, then you can do things remotely. But trying to start doing things remotely, it's really hard. So yeah, it's gotten better mostly because now I'm interfacing with the people that are actually instructing the courses.
No, that's amazing. I mean, face-to-face is by far, doesn't matter what you do in the world. Zoom is great. Skype is great. But you know what? Those relationships start to, bond together when you're sitting down over a coffee or talking to them face-to-face.
It's like when you spend time with family, because if you're on the phone for 20 minutes, you talk about stuff. But if you're at the cottage for a week, 2 weeks, or a month, you sort of have all these little things sort of come up, and it's those side or sort of extra conversations where new things begin to happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. I'm talking to Craig Elias, entrepreneur in residence at Bow Valley College. If you want to check out the Bow Valley College, their site is in the comment section. You can just click on it and it will take you directly to their website. So you created and run 5 community-based, and I mentioned them in in your introduction, the Innovation Rodeo, the Meetup group, the VentureQuest, 150 Startups and Inventures. Please talk about them a little bit.
Yeah, so a lot of this started when I started just on campus working with the dean, helping students become entrepreneurs. And David Allwright, the dean of the business school, he exposed me to this concept called community-based entrepreneurship, which is how do you find a way to impact the community outside of just your own community. So in this case, it's how do we find a way to impact startups outside of just students at Bow Valley College. Yeah. So I started doing coffee meetings with startups and scale-ups and even aspiring entrepreneurs at the coffee shop close to the college. I used to go to the Good Earth Cafe. Now I go to the Luke's, street level in the library. And sometimes I'm there for 6, 8, 10 coffee meetings a week. And then I went to Kamloops. Got invited to go to Kamloops for a week. So they have this program called a fellowship program. You pay your own way there. You pay for your own meals. But they house you for a week, and you spend a week and you hang out at their what's called KIC, their Kamloops Innovation Center. The theory being that when you're finished there, you've left behind some of your expertise and some of your network. And I was like, wow, that is super cool. And at the time, I was doing some stuff with the Calgary Library. The older one had put together this idea lab, and they were going to launch this idea lab in July. And I'm like, hang on a second, July, Rodeo, you should have something like an idea rodeo. When I found out that the idearodeo.ca domain name was available, I gave it to them, heard nothing. And then I was talking to one guy named Carl Miller about this whole thing, and we started thinking, hang on a second, Calgary Stampede, like 50,000 entrepreneurs just magically are in Calgary for 7 to 10 days. We do nothing to connect the out-of-town entrepreneurs with the in-town entrepreneurs. We should fix that. Yeah. So I came up with this concept called an innovation rodeo. I emailed Carl. He then sent that email off to 15 people. One of them was a lady named Carrie Gordon, who was running Startup Calgary at the time. She introduced me to Jill Cross, who was the great-granddaughter of A.E. Cross here in town. She's like, wow, great idea. You should come meet my team, because they had this innovation committee for the Calgary Stampede. I went to meet the innovation committee, and on the committee was a guy named Richard. And Richard's a lawyer, and he's like, wow, I love this idea. Would you like some money? And in 3 weeks, we built a 5-day event that had 4 keynote speakers, 22 panelists, 150 people showed up, and we generated 2.5 million impressions on Twitter.
Wow.
3 weeks. We had total home run first time round. So that's been growing and getting bigger, and we bring in better speakers every single year. This year, we are bringing in the founders for what is called Startup Commons. So Oscar's coming in from Barcelona, Spain, and Balto's coming in from Helsinki, Finland. And we're going to spend the entire week helping startups go from where they are to the next stage in their natural journey. And after the first one, the lawyers that gave us the money said, that's good, but can you do this? Like, can you somehow find a way to impact the entire province? Can you find a way to include the number 150? Because next year's Canada's 150th birthday. So 2:30 in the morning the next day, I woke up and I was like, hang on a second. It's called 150 startups. Like, how do I find a way to work with the publicly funded post-secondary schools in the province to just have 6 students every year on every institution think about entrepreneurship as a potential career? I came to work. I told the dean what I'm working on. He's like, yeah, that's never going to work. Well, your job is to go prove me wrong. Within 3 days, I had 12 out of 15 schools I talked to said they would be part of this program. I went back to see the dean, told him what I'd done in 3 days. He then gave me all the contact information for all the deans of all the business schools and all their EAs all the way across the province. And within 7 days, we had 25 out of 26 schools all said, you build it, we'll be in. So that's how we kind of got to this 150 startups piece. Want to be Wednesdays. We try to find a way to help successful entrepreneurs give something back to aspiring entrepreneurs. So we run an event on the second Wednesday where successful entrepreneurs share their success with students. And then what we do 2 weeks later, we bring in a social entrepreneur who maybe is struggling. And then the students that have learned from all these successful entrepreneurs, they pass that knowledge on to the struggling entrepreneurs. So that's that whole piece. So Want to be Wednesdays, 150 startups, Innovation Rodeo, the Student to Startups Initiative. It actually started as a result of some research on the economic impact of student debt. So the average, I forget what percentage of students end up with student debt, but the average student debt is $30,000 a year. And it prevents students from becoming an entrepreneur. Now they're like, I need to get a job. So even though they want to become an entrepreneur, they don't. So I started doing some research around what would happen if we were to postpone interest and payments on student loans for just 3 years after you graduate. And the research said we could have an impact of $67 billion on the Canadian economy if we did something like this. So there is this work on an endowment fund to be able to, if we can't get the governments to go do this, Ontario actually went first. If you start a company within 6 months or have a company incorporated when you graduate, instead of getting just 6 months where you get a grace period, no interest or payments on student loans, they now extend it for a year. The goal is to get to 3 years. And the goal is also that for every full-time employee you hire for a year or more, we take $5,000 off your student debt. So that whole piece started. And I've been looking for an opportunity to do something to help students get together. And it was about a month ago, a student from SAIT, we're sitting down having this coffee at a place called The Hub, Bow Trail on 45th Street, saying, why can't we do this? And I'm like, yeah, why can't we? So at that meeting, we actually started this meetup group with the intent of then being able to have regular events, once a month, maybe at Platform Calgary, and then once a month on a Saturday at The Hub or somewhere else. That's still in its early days. VentureQuest is the business idea that we have on campus. So it's just for students on campus, but it's not just business school students. It's any student anywhere across the campus. And 2/3 of those that get in and 2/3 of the winners usually have English as a second language.
Wow.
But there's one more thing coming. So we're actually working on a hackathon. But instead of calling it a hackathon, it's called a techathon. And here's what we're working on. We're going to find a handful of tech firms in town, let's say 5. We're going to run, so it's on May 9th. We're still setting everything up. So on May 9th, what we're going to do is we're going to have up to 150 people come on campus, be in teams of maximum 5, and their job is to pick a technology firm in town to then come up with either a new feature for an existing product or come up with a new product for that technology firm. So we're then introducing students predominantly to these technology firms. So they don't want to leave, like the data says, they leave and don't come back because they don't think there's a cool technology industry or sector in town. And at the same time, we're helping these technology companies come up with new ideas or features so we can help them also grow bigger. That's our next one.
Oh, that one sounds really neat because, yeah, the stats do say that. And if we can get the students to either get hired here, if that's what they want, or if this, maybe that inspires them to create their own company. I mean, that is excellent.
Yeah, that's part of it, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love it. I mean, you've been on all sides of the entrepreneurial process. You've been, you've won a pitch, you won money, you moved to Silicon Valley, you came back. Well, why is it so important? I mean, creating this is just outstanding, and we can't thank you enough for what you share. But why is it important for you to give back?
So for me, I want to try and find a way to put role models on all the campuses, because the data suggests that as soon as you have a role model on a campus, everything changes. Now there's all kinds of other students that aspire to be just like that guy or that gal. They're inspired then to become an entrepreneur. And I think that's what it takes. And I think that for me, this is my own personal opinion. I have a view, doesn't mean I'm right. I think the problem with startups in Calgary or in Canada in general is the fact that people are too nice. They're like, oh, it's a really good idea. You should go do this. Nobody tells them, as Carrie Gordon would tell you, nobody tells them your baby is ugly. You've got to, the sooner you find out that your idea isn't going to work, the sooner you will give up on that idea and you'll go find one that does work. And for me, it's about the process. Once you learn the process, you can do your second one really easily. In my case, I was super fortunate. I did an executive MBA. In there was a new technology commercialization course taught by a guy named Ron George. And I built this entire business plan, model, financials, everything for an emerging e-grocer. So that when I got involved in this $1 billion idea competition, and after I pitched and someone says, okay, I need a business plan, I'd done it once already. The second time was really easy. So that was part of my advantage. So how do I find a way to help other people go through the exact same thing? And one of my favorite examples is a student named Joni. Joni got involved in our first year of 150 startups, had this idea, wasn't sure if it was going to work, went through the process, learned that the idea was not going to work, gave up on that idea. She then went to a different university. She then went to the University of Calgary and then joined a team, but took what she learned and helped that team win a $100,000 pitch competition on campus. So that's a really good example. Another one that's totally different is a student actually at Concordia University of Edmonton. His name is Jason. So Jason came up with this idea, and I don't understand it, so I'm going to try and explain it to the best of my ability. He, I think, if I remember correctly, is selling discount codes for in-app purchases for video games. That's what he sells. Had this little idea, went through this process, and realized, hang on a second, this idea is way bigger than I originally thought it was. And now he's crazy successful up in Concordia. He's now a role model. He's making really good coin doing exactly that. But it was the process that helped them understand, hey, I got this little idea, but guess what? The potential is actually way bigger.
No, I mean, I guess that is very interesting. Those are two great examples. I always ask for examples, and those are outstanding. I guess kind of let's maybe pick the first one when you're talking about Jason there. I mean, yeah. He realized obviously that once he got into it, that there's an opportunity to be bigger. What do you think the biggest predictor of a person's success is when they're starting up?
So here's what the data says. The data says it's basically the size of your network. The bigger your network, the more likely you are to be successful. And it comes down to this. It comes down to the fact that there's now more people that would love to help you. All you have to do is ask. So if I only have a small network and I can only ask 3 entrepreneurs, I'm going to get a little bit of help. But if I have like 30, 40, in my case, I went for 50 cups of coffee as I worked this little idea like this big and turned it something like this. It was all those coffee meetings that helped poke holes in what I had and then fix the holes when I went to other people. So there's nothing else. I want to say emotional intelligence matters, resilience matters, being passionate about your the customers you're helping or the problem you're solving, not your idea, is also important. But all the data suggests the biggest single predictor of success is the size of your network.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I've been preaching that for a while and just saying, you have to get out there. You have to go to these events. You have to go to whatever it is, meetups, coffees. I mean, I have probably 25 meetings a month with entrepreneurs, and I think that your message and what we're saying is getting out there. People are asking for help, and they're not scared to reach out on LinkedIn or whatever it be. They're not. That's just the way the world's becoming. It's so easy to reach out to somebody and say, "Hey, do you have time for coffee?" And I'll bet you everybody says yes.
Especially if you say, hi, my name is, and I am a student.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm just going to give you some examples about, so this is what's called transactional velocity, the ability to get stuff done faster. The data from McKinsey says that a proctor service 6 months late to market loses fully 1/3 of all the profit it ever would have generated. So just give you an example about this luck factor when you go out networking. I meet this guy named Scott Stewart, who runs a really cool company called Venture for Canada. So if any startup wants to hire a student, they actually give you funding to hire a student. If the student wants to go work for a startup, they'll then help that student get paid while they go to work for that startup. So Scott came into town for INVENTURES. He was like, why can't we find a way to forgive student debt if someone starts a business? That's how we kind of started this idea. And then I'm like, that's a really good idea, but I don't think we can forgive student debt right away. We have to find a way to postpone interest and payments. So I'm working on this idea. A few months later, I'm in Australia where I pick up that award for entrepreneurship excellence. And the guy who sits next to me, his name is Alexis Conrad. Alexis Conrad is the Assistant Deputy Minister for the federal government of Canada that runs the student loan program. So I'm 14,000 kilometers from home. He's 15,000 kilometers from home. He's the guy who sits next to me while I win this award. We start talking. He's like, really great idea. Go away, do some research. I got some money from Enactus. And I hired a student who discovered there's a database owned by Statistics Canada. It's called the Canadian Employee-Employer Dynamics Database. It's tracked every single taxpaying citizen and every single taxpaying corporation since the year 2000. So if I want data on the impact of students becoming entrepreneurs, or when they get into entrepreneurship, and when they leave, and all the rest of that stuff, that's the database. So my student phones up, asks for access to the database, gets told this. You have to go away and write a novel. Okay, so write me something like War and Peace and submit it to me and tell me why you want access to the database. You wait 6 months. If you get approval, you then have to get security clearance. Once you get security clearance, you have to sign a confidentiality agreement. Once you sign the confidentiality agreement, you have to fly to Ottawa to work on this computer because it's not attached to the internet. While you're there, you have to be monitored by a staff member of Stats Canada. And I'm like, I don't have the time or patience for something like this. So I do some work for South by Southwest down in Austin, Texas. I'm on an advisory committee. I was in Austin, Texas. I was lamenting about this problem. And the lady I was talking to says, well, you should phone my friend. I'm like, who's your friend? She says, oh, his name's Anil. I'm like, okay, but what does Anil do? It turns out Anil is the chief statistician for Stats Canada. I got an introduction, and 3 weeks later, got all the data I needed to go away and crunch all the numbers and do the research. So it's just amazing how stuff happens when you get out there and tell people what you're trying to get done, right?
Yeah. Oh, you're preaching to the choir, and I love hearing those stories. And it's amazing when you never know who you're talking to, right?
Totally.
Yeah, I did a presentation here this weekend, and I was stressing that comment, saying you just do not know who you are talking to.
I'll give you a different example. So the first year we ran the student track for INVENTURES, had a student. His name was Cole. He's out of Nate. Cole did a pitch. Now, Cole tells the story that at that pitch competition, he got his teeth kicked in because he didn't do really well. But It just turned out that in the room was a lady named Azra. And Azra runs a 5-week boot camp down in Silicon Valley. It's $12,000 US to go. She liked his idea. She gave him a scholarship for $12,000 US. He went down to this thing called Draper University. So 5 weeks boot camp, right? Accommodation included. At the end of 5 weeks, you get 2 minutes to pitch to 200 angel investors and venture capitalists. There's 80 startups from 23 countries in this boot camp. At the end of the boot camp and the end of that pitch day, his company got picked as the most investable company out of all 80 from around the world. Wow. He didn't even win the pitch competition. What's happened as a result, we now actually send 3 students every year down there. Last fall, we sent 3 students down. 2 of those students both made it into the top 3 in the exact same thing. Those are, again, more examples of how do you create role models, get them out of town, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that is excellent. So I guess what's next for you and I guess your role for, within Bull Valley College?
So the next thing for us is actually we're taking what we do now across the province. We've been asked by United Nations to go do this, but to be able to do it in East Africa. and to say, instead of just having institutions in one province, can you go do this within 3 completely different countries in East Africa? So we're right now working towards going to Africa, spending a week with all the people involved in entrepreneurship within these post-secondaries, so we can then help them do something exactly the same thing that we do, run these information sessions, skill building sessions, and pitch competitions for students across all those different countries to get more students to then become role models within their own institutions throughout those countries in East Africa. That's next. The hackathon on May 9th is next. And then working on this endowment for students that would like to become an entrepreneur but have student debt. So I've been talking to a number of different people who have said to me that if I build this endowment, they throw as much as $50,000 into this thing. But all we're doing is paying someone's student loan for up to 3 years so they can get started as an entrepreneur. Because in that research that we did with all the Stats Canada database information says that the failure rate for first-time entrepreneurs or startups is highest when you're 24, 25, and 26. And once you get past the age of 26, your success rate goes through the roof. But it's the first 3 years that everybody needs help. That's the next thing we're working on.
Oh, that's awesome. That all sounds excellent. So in your vast wisdom, your vast travels, what's one piece of advice? I mean, you've given boatloads of advice today, and we appreciate it. But what's your one piece of advice to a small business startup or entrepreneur?
Honestly, don't be an arrogant prick.
Ah, nice.
It's amazing how many people are so in love with their idea that they're completely uncoachable. And they won't take advice from anybody. These people have no mentors. They come into a place and think they're God's gift to entrepreneurship or an industry, and people just blow you up. So the best thing you can possibly do as an entrepreneur, be curious. Like, take all the advice and feedback you can get from as many people as possible. Fall in love with the problem you're solving or the customer you're helping, but don't be one of those uncoachable idiots that never gets anywhere because nobody wants to help, and you're so in love with your solution, you've got these blinkers on and you can't see anything else outside. That's my biggest piece of advice.
Oh, and that is an outstanding. An idea is a starting point, and the more you reach out, the more it grows and away. So, and I love that. I mean, I think that's excellent, and I'm seeing more and more people reaching out and helping, and I'm introducing people to to people all over the map, which is the way it should be. And in this province, it's really growing, and the entrepreneurial community is really tight knit and willing to share. And I've seen that, even in the last 6 years, really expand. So that's great to hear on your end. And I can't thank you enough, Craig, for coming on, sharing your knowledge. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, my pleasure. Have a great afternoon.
And I hope everybody enjoys it. Thank you to Evolutionize. And next week we have Platform Calgary come in. So thank you again, Craig. And I hope everybody has a fantastic day. Talk to you soon. All right, Craig. Bye-bye.
Bye.